Few things are for sure in this life, but this is. If we live for any substantial amount of time, we will encounter grief due to the loss of a loved one. Not something any of us ever want, and we all handle it differently. This podcast is to feature those who have done purposeful and meaningful things through their grief. These people featured on here are normal folks, just like you and me, who were thrust into a place they never wanted to be in their lives. A painful place. As they moved through their pain, they realized that something worthwhile, something for the greater good, could come out of the unthinkable. I'm sure that none of them would ever consider themselves to be a hero, but when I searched the definition of the word hero, I found this: a person who is admired or idolized for courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. And that fit. And so it's my privilege to bring you the remarkable stories of these heroes in grief. Hi, everyone. This is Tom, your host for the Heroes in Grief podcast. And the response has been incredible so far, and I want to thank you for that. It's getting out to people, and they're letting us know that it's helping them. And that is what it's all about. I want to make you aware of a way that you can support this podcast without having to spend 1 cent, and that is through affiliate marketing. I've set up affiliate marketing for online shopping. If you do online shopping, then I have links to all the major retailers, most of them anyways, and I can provide them for you so that when you buy online through those links, you'll help support the podcast through the percentages that we get. It doesn't cost you anything more. You just shop like you regularly would on the sites that you love. It's very easy. All you have to do is shop. And that's it. Just let me know the links to the places that you want to shop at, and I will provide the affiliate links so that you can do it. If you want more information on this, you can go to heroesingrief.com. It takes you to the Linktree page where a video explains it in a little more detail. But you can always email me at tom@heroesingrief.com, and I can answer questions for you. But you can support the podcast that way, and it's very easy, very simple, and it doesn't cost you a cent. Isn't that great? Thank you. Now here's today's episode. Well, good to meet you.
Good to meet you, too.
So you're in Wisconsin, I see.
Yes, I am in Wisconsin.
So you have to tell me if you know of Spotted Cow.
Spotted Cow, is that a beer?
Yes.
Yes. I never drink beer because I am gluten-free, but I've heard of the Spotted Cow beer.
Yeah, basically my in-laws, they live in the Chicago area, north of Chicago, and they brought me a pack back from a sample pack from the New Glarus Brewery, which is Spotted Cow.
Not very far.
Right. So love the Spotted Cow, and we came out and visited them and went up and got some at that time too. So that's my Wisconsin story.
Oh, that's fabulous. Okay.
And so we just let it roll. We're just talking about everything, and it's a big commercial for you, really.
Thank you.
So yeah, that's because this is my purpose, is just to get everybody's stories out there.
Okay, everything you're talking about is in this book, so you want to read this book, and it is about all the things you just said, Mm-hmm. And we'll talk more about it, but you're gonna love this book.
I believe that. So is your last name Amelong?
Yes.
Okay. I do a very brief intro, but we're already rolling. So, I mean, I just kind of let it. It's kind of the Joe Rogan approach. We just talk. And,
okay.
Very casual, nothing formal.
Okay.
So I'm not into that.
Great. Well, and I listen to some of your podcasts, so I'm ready.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
No, it's been wonderful to hear some of your speakers and hear yourself, and I'm so sorry about the loss of your son. That's
Thank you.
Very tragic.
It's an honor to have you on.
Thank you.
And folks, we're talking to Kristina Amelong, and we got connected. I'm not sure how we got connected. Maybe through your publicist or something, right?
Exactly. my
Yeah.
publicist.
So she sent me an email, I think, and that's great. I mean, that stuff amazes me too, because I never even expected that from the podcast, where people start approaching me to get people on. And so, and I did read quite a bit about what you're doing in all the things that you're doing, but your story is amazing too. So I would really love you to share what you would like to about the story. And of course, we're going to talk about your book, your memoir about your brother and your brother Jay. And but why don't you set the stage for us for that, so we can get an idea of what it's all about with you?
All right. So when I was 16, back in 1980, my brother, who was at the time 12, started talking about dying, that he was going to die young, that it had something to do with the green car, that he would be up above his body watching the paramedics try to bring him back to life, but that there was nothing that anyone could do. He picked the cemetery where he wanted to be buried, and he picked the song Stairway to Heaven to be played at his funeral. And as you might imagine, we had no context for any of this. And so for myself, I mostly ignored him or told him to go away, told him to shut up, these kinds of things. My mother was quite traumatized by the whole thing. And I don't know the full extent of her journey around it, but she did look for help. She did talk to her friends and possibly a therapist about what am I to do. She tried to ground him a lot. And he indeed, a year and a half after he started telling this story, he was hit by a green car and killed quite violently. And so what I experienced was a lot of trauma and a lot of pain and suffering. And my mother certainly had just tremendous pain from what happened, survivor's guilt of not being able to stop this accident. And a lot of his friends, as one would read in the memoir, I did this whole process of interviewing people who knew him. Because and I think this often happens when we have a big loss, is that community around the loss, the people involved often split. And so I lost all Jay's friends, my mom, really. And so when I went to write this book, and my mother wouldn't talk to me about it, I just didn't know where to turn. As one finds out in the book, I started doing contemplative writing. And in that process of putting pen to paper and just writing what comes out, no matter what the prompt, my brother Jay would often show up and in the writing, and people, when I read the writing aloud, because in the process of contemplative writing that I did, it was with a group and everyone wrote for 20 minutes, and then we'd share our writing in the circle. People would say, you should write a book about that. And so I thought, okay, I'll write a book about that. And as part of that process, I needed to talk to people. And so I've reached out to 10, 12, 15 people, cousins and aunts and uncles and friends of Jay's specifically, friends of my mother, and learned quite a lot in the journey. The driver of the car, I called him, and that's all in the book. And so the book came out on May 27th, which is his death anniversary. He transitioned 44 years ago. And that was the day the book came out. And so I'm just very profoundly honored to be carrying this mystery and to be sharing it with other people. I've heard since the book came out 2 weeks ago from people who knew Jay, and the book the stories help so much with helping people understand the continuity of consciousness and, attitude around death from someone who was facing his death and quite young. So there's a flavor of it. Any comments or questions from you?
I would have a ton. But I was shocked to see that it was May 27th that it just came out. So this is very timely. That's great. Now, with your brother, how would he bring these things out? If I don't want you to give away a lot from the book, if that's in there and that type of thing, but like, how did these conversations just come out, or did he just, people probably wonder that, like, how did, because you just say what happened because you've been saying it for a long time. But I mean,
Right.
how did that transpire?
Well, that was part of what was so wild about it, is that he'd just say things like, it's not going to be much longer, as he's walking through the kitchen as we're getting dinner ready. And we might say, well, what's not going to be much longer? And then he'd say, well, I'm going to die. So it was very much in passing. Or, for instance, there is a story in the book where one of his friends and he are out swimming, and the friend has an experience of sinking to the bottom of the water and experiencing himself drowning, and Jay pulls him up and drags him to shore. And the friend says, is experiencing this near-death experience, I don't know. And Jay says, don't worry, if you would have died, it would have been okay, because I saw my death and it's okay. As one finds in the book, and really, because even though I've written the book, and even though there's a lot of stories that are in the book, you can't kind of give it away because it's still a mystery. Like, how does a person see their future? This thing about precognition and seeing his future. And so he told me and my mother that he had dreams about this forthcoming death, but actually, in the process of interviewing people, I learned that he had gotten his hands on LSD, and he was actually doing LSD as a 12-year-old and happened to run into this future vision.
Well, there's a lot going on with hallucinogens and all of that now with the spiritual realm and all of that. So, but that's a whole nother rabbit hole. I don't want to. Do you mind if I ask a hard question?
Any question is perfect.
Because I'm thinking from the skeptic's standpoint. All right. So he says all these things. The circumstances of the accident. Now, someone may come back and say, well, he orchestrated what happened to fit the narrative.
Well, that would be maybe even more of a mystery. How does that? So one thing is, this happened 44 years ago, and there wasn't the big eruption of teenagers, young people having so much trouble, angst, depression. He was a happy kid living a normal life, very popular, very happy. You see this in the book a lot. You hear stories from his friends about his personality. So besides this thing, he wasn't an unusual child. He was playing hockey. He was playing Little League. He was running around with his friends. And so I don't think there's no way that he could have orchestrated this. And also, he didn't have depression. Like I said, he didn't have suicidal ideations. So it is just that mysterious, which in many ways, right, is even harder to believe, because it points to the mystery of the universe, as you were talking about in the beginning, like, what is time, and what is the universe?
Yeah.
And who are we? So these big questions come through in this whole investigation and journey. So also, I have firsthand accounts of the boy who was with them while they were riding their bikes while the accident was happening. They told me what happened and how it happened. And then also, there was a police officer having lunch with this guy that ended up hitting him. And he didn't drink. He had a normal lunch. And it turns out, because I called the driver, so I called him to talk to him. And I said to him, and this was like, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago. So it was like 38 years later, and no one had had any touch with him. And so I called him up and I said, I want you to know that if you need to hang up, because there's so much pain and suffering around this and so much blame. And that's a big thing, is getting through these qualities of, who's to blame and whose fault is this and all of that. But anyways, I called him up and I said, this might be a hard call. My name is Kristina Amelong. Do you know who I am? And again, this was 38 years later. And he said, yes, an eye for an eye. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, my daughter died of a pharmaceutical drug overdose. And I still didn't really know what he meant. But since I've seen the police report, I've talked to the boy who was with him, who's now a man. And I think what had happened is that he had a change in his pharmaceutical medication the day before. And he believes that that change caused him to black out. He was only blacked out for like 4 minutes. He never saw the accident. His car hit Jay, he didn't hit Jay. He was literally blacked out. He never saw the bicycles. He never saw the accident. And then his car was stopped by hitting a tree. So right there, I guess no one's ever asked me that question, actually. So that's interesting, because right there, the point about that the driver wasn't driving the car, so the mystery.
Right. What I was getting to is that someone might say, well, Jay drove into the car, and knew it was a green car and drove into a green car. That's where I was coming from with that. But obviously, from what you described, that's not even close to the circumstances. So that's all. That's why the skeptics will always come at you, with the crazy stuff. So it's like,
for that, I would have to say read the book, and that will give you the best insight. Are we audio only or also video?
No, we're both.
Okay, so yes, read the book.
What My Brother Knew, a memoir. That is the name of it. Of course, the link will be in the show notes, and we'll have that there. And I'm going to read it, so you should too. I tell everyone all the time I like to do these organically, so I get the stories from the person, and I like the visceral reactions, to things, and even from myself that amazes me, some of these things, and it blows me away. So I love these connections that come up. It happens all the time in the podcast, the synchronicities, all these different things. And it astounds me, and it causes great confirmation for me. And I love it. So, but then I did read some things that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said, that's great. Congratulations to
thanks.
Synchronicities in the context of your podcast.
It is. And it's very helpful as I continue my journey. So I saw that, and you did mention this with you and your mom afterwards, the difficulties that you went through in processing and everything. What transpired through all of that and took you to, further on to where you are now?
Well, I've gone to therapy a ton. I've had multiple amazing therapists. That's one thing. 2 is I put myself into the 12-step programs. So I did a lot of work through Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous. And then also I did a bunch of peer counseling where you learn how to both be a client and be a counselor. And I've done hundreds of hours of raging and sobbing and working through my own survivor's guilt, working through I caused this, I could have done something, to much more of a spiritual narrative, as you say, where, wow, what is this mystery and what happened and how does precognition happen and what is the continuity of consciousness and what does it mean that someone can be up above their body watching themselves be worked on. And what does it mean that a 12-year-old is okay with dying when they were a happy child and very vibrantly alive? And so, yeah, that's what I have to say about all of that.
Yeah, I do believe, and I know it's hard for some to digest early on in grief for sure, but I do believe that, people like your brother, my son, they they have a role in what our existence is here, with what has occurred, and the tragedies and all of that. And I think, yes, there's a different perspective that you can gain when you search it out on the cosmic level and the spiritual level, that you gain a sense of understanding and even acceptance to some level of our humanness, that you can actually process it as something that is part of this whole purpose and scheme for us down here, or what we some people believe, and I tend to lean this way, that these soul contracts are what we come here to do, this earth school that we have, that our spirits are gaining things through all of this. And so hard for some to understand and process. I understand that, but it certainly gives a lot of hope. And did your brother, because now when I think, and sometimes hindsight, of course, can be 20/20, but Jeff, for my son, seemed to be someone who had this in inner understanding of things, even though it wasn't verbalized a whole lot, or that type of thing. Now, when Jay would make his comments, like, they were matter of fact, and he just kind of went on with things. Is that the way it was? And maybe he understood all this and accepted it, and so they have some kind of sense,
Correct. Yes. Very odd, right? He didn't have to go to lots of therapy to work this out. He just had it worked out somehow. And I don't know how. It's not the way I am made. I don't want to die. And I wouldn't have wanted to die that way for sure. So it's part of the mystery. But and like I said, I'm getting a lot of response from different people who knew him, and one of the responses I got recently was from one of his many best friends, who said, "Oh, I always introduced Jay as my best friend, even now, but through reading your book, I found out he was lots of people's best friend." So he seemed to have come into this world as a very happy and kind person, and this experience did not change him.
Did he share these things with his other friends too, his premonitions?
Some of them he did, but some of them he didn't. Yeah. So, like, for instance, the boy Kurt who was with him, he didn't know anything about this, and when I tried to tell him about this, he wasn't even able to receive what I was telling him. He's just very much felt quite guilty all this time. But again, as I said about reading the book, one of the characters in the book, Stevie, he was told. And then it's not in the book because I've continued to research and talk to the friends. And now also people are writing me who are reading the book. And there was a group of kids, supposedly they were skipping school and smoking pot and sitting around and talking. And Jay brought this up to them. And so they were like, "Oh, yeah, I heard." And I said, "Well, what was your response?" And he said, "We just laughed at him. We just told him, 'What are you talking about? That can't be real. Shut up,' and went on to other topics that 12 and 13-year-olds would want to talk about. Like, even if someone walked up to you right now and said, 'Oh, I'm going to die,' like, it instantly kind of blows up your sense making if there's no reason for it that we know. As you say, there's some mystery where we're participating in this journey of existence, whether we're on this plane or not. But so he did tell different people. There's a story in the book where he's telling my cousin, multiple stories in the book where he's telling my mother and I.
Hello, friends. I just wanted to take a brief break here in the podcast to make you aware of a very exciting partnership that Heroes in Grief has just formed, and that is with Get Griefy magazine. I'm going to let their founder and editor-in-chief, Kara Sanchez, tell you all about it.
Hey, Heroes in Grief listeners. Life after loss isn't easy, but it can be colorful and full of possibilities. Meet Get Griefy magazine, a vibrant resource filled with inspiring stories of life after loss, expert advice, and voices from everyday grievers and thought leaders. Together, they're here to help guide you toward the side of life that's left to be lived fully and authentically. Dive into Get Griefy for free on issue or snag a print copy on Amazon. Connect with us on Instagram at Get Griefy Magazine or visit getgriefymagazine.com to explore, join our thriving small business collective, or discover advertising opportunities. Let's embrace life after loss, boldly and together.
Now back to our episode. Wow. So I want to ask about a couple different things. One of them is, have you experienced connections with him since?
So I have a lot of synchronicities happen, and they happen in relationship to his birthday, his death day. Like, I didn't pick the day the book would come out. I had because when you write a book, you go through it like a lot of times and you persistently find errors. I have to say there may be no errors in this book now, which is pretty amazing. I've had multiple readers say, yeah, I couldn't find a single error, but the death date was wrong by one day. And yet the publisher still picked the day of his death. So that was an example of a synchronicity. But for instance, and this is in the book too, is the business that I have. It's an internet business it's an alternative health business, and I focus on colon cleansing and enemas and other therapies that can be taken in through the colon. Well, I didn't come up with that idea. I was running a clinic and a guy came to me and he had the same accident. He had been hit by a car while he was riding his bike, and he had the same name as my brother. His name is J. Phillip, and he was called JP. And he came from Chicago to have some treatment from me. And he said, you need to open up an enema store. And because he had the same accident and because his name was the same, I just did it. And I happened to do it with a woman. I created a website with her because she was a webmaster. She had the same initials as my brother, but she had the same exact birthday, day, month, year. Was born on the same day. And so us three made my business, Optimal Health Network. Anytime anything happens like that with those kind of synchronicities, I follow up on it always. He doesn't so much show up in like a shimmering spirit, which I have seen a couple times, or like a felt sense of an energy, which I've also experienced a couple times, but very little. But I've experienced, 100 of these amazing synchronicities where something resonates with his story and I follow it up. So So
you didn't feel like he was manifesting himself through these people or anything like that?
No, I absolutely did feel like he was communicating to me through these people. 100%. Well, him and the whole of the cosmos, that magical hand of reality that nudges us in one direction or another. Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of quality of the bigger mystery driving my life.
Mm-hmm. Now, you spoke of the work you're doing in the colon cleanse and that type of thing. Are you doing other work too, as far as on the grief side or any of that, the spiritual side, any of that?
Well, so I work for the Center for World Philosophy and Religion, which is a global think tank to basically solve the meta crisis and to reweave a new story of what's possible for the human being, integrating the best of the religions and the wisdom traditions and the sciences into this new story we call cosmoerotic humanism. So very much, I used to be pretty, like I've worked for Greenpeace and done all these different things. I used to be quite concerned about the trajectory of humanity and the risk of extinction and what we're doing to the insect world and etc. I have more calm around that, but my brother's seeing his future and no one doing anything or responding appropriate sort of led me to, oh, what's the future looking like? And what are we going to do about the future? And how do we face the future with the most courage and the most beauty and the most possibility? So that's kind of how I contribute to making a better world to help with grief. I also I'm holding a lot of people who are reading the book and listening to their stories. I do a lot of peer counseling still. And also in terms of my paid work, I work with people either over the phone or in person doing enemas, massage, nutritional consulting, testing around hormones or stress levels, all these different things. So I do all sorts of things to help people improve the quality of their lives and face their difficulties and walk through them.
Mm-hmm. Intriguing to me, the religious side, I probably shouldn't say religious, right? That's not so much. It's religion and spirituality. I was a Christian pastor for 15 years and in Christian ministry for 20. Mm-hmm. My views are severe, really changed now. I don't adhere to the dogmas of any religion or anything, but it's always intriguing to me how what I feel now, the understanding of all these things now, quantum physics and our consciousness living on and all of this and the collective consciousness, all these things and how I see how they bleed through into all those religions. And Mark Anthony, the psychic lawyer, psychic explorer, I interviewed him and he said that it's man's way of trying to explain the divine. And that's it makes a lot of sense, the texts that you have and everything. Great guidelines, a lot of them, and I believe that a lot of it is inspired and applicable. But then man took the elements of that and made religions as a control thing, is what I think. What I'm gathering out of it all as I learn. I continue to learn and move forward in all of this, but. Does the organization you're with, do they look at, they looking at all religions, and is it like exploring all of those elements, or what really does that organization do?
Yeah, so we're working on a great library. We're collecting the lineage traditions and pulling out the very best of them, the wisdom of them, the beauty of them, the truth of them, and working on putting forward a new great library. For instance, like this book that we just put out recently, Whole Mate, The Future of Relationships by Dr. Mark Goffney and Barbara Marx Hubbard, is all about what kind of relationships do the human beings need to have in order to carry us into the future, that our love lists are too short, as my teacher, Dr. Mark Goffney, always says, and that we need to love bigger and wider and deeper, as many people as possible, and that we need to look towards a joint future. It's not about romance. It can be about romance, but it's about, caring about people and openly loving, and also that soulmate we had role mates, which is about people getting together to have children, get married, live their lives, but that often ends in divorce or all these different things. And then the idea is soulmates, right? Where you're looking into each other's eyes and you're like, wow, I see God in you. And that often, because you're just looking at each other, but rather we need to, stand side by side and look out into the future and have these bigger pictures of what's possible for the human being. So that is what we're doing, and we're integrating. So there's a lot of science, the best of the sciences, like you brought up physics, the best of physics, the best of the neurogenesis, all of this stuff about there's so much potential for the human being. And you talk about, being the divine and our stories being important in the cosmic scroll. And so how do we prove that? How do we show that? How do we inspire around that? Those are the kinds of things that we're doing in the center we have a global festival once a year in Europe. We do a board meeting in Vermont once a year, which is just coming up in a couple weeks. And we also, as I said, we're publishing what's called the Great Library, which is about 100 books on the subject of cosmoerotic humanism.
Very interesting. I will be looking into that for sure.
All right.
I love exploring all of that. I wonder where I will find all the time. But I'm part of an organization called Helping Parents Heal, and it's for, I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I've looked it up. That's how I learned about you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I appreciate that they leave openness for all of this, and they embrace it. It's not required by any means, but it really lends a source of hope that I don't see in other organizations because of that. And so, I'm, at one level with it, everyone's at different levels, but then that's where we are. But, that's the freeing part of it, I guess. What do you think about AI in all of this, as you talked about humanity and our existence and as we move forward?
Well, we have a big problem with AI. As I said, Dr. Mark Goffney, what he calls it is like the death of our humanity, that we're facing being displaced, basically. And so the human being really has to come to understand who we are and our divinity in order to basically evolve into so that we can cohabitate with AI without feeling like we're useless. And also the whole idea that we matter a lot, that it's that this whole notion that life doesn't matter. No, we all matter immensely, and our journey is a cosmic journey. It is not just one lifetime. Like right now, so I talked about the center. Every Sunday we do a live broadcast called One Mountain, Many Paths, and actually we're doing a segment on reincarnation right now and the evidence for it. But like justice is not done in one lifetime, and so right there, it's like a pointing out instruction to, well, the cosmos is a loving cosmos. It is a place that calls for transformation. And this does not happen in just one lifetime. And this whole notion of the continuity of consciousness, as Barbara Marx Hubbard would call it, conscious evolution, that our consciousness, our inner selves, the energy of ourselves, it was here before us, it is here now, and it will be here after us. And it is being, as I like to say, pressed upon the lips of God, our growth, our loving, our transformations that we figure out. So it's very meaningful to be a human being.
AI can speak love, but it can't love.
Exactly. It does not have an interior in the way that the human being does. And so that's why we really have to make friends with our interior and share our interior and, process our interior. What you're saying about wanting young people to have access to well, what is it like inside of you? And when you feel sad, what do we do with that? And when you feel angry, what do we do with that? And so we really need to bring forward this capacity to work with our own consciousness and grow ourselves and bring back the democratization of enlightenment.
Mm-hmm. You talked about reincarnation. I didn't have very firm beliefs on reincarnation until I started reading like Jim Tucker's works and things. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but they study children and their stories that are verifiable. Children who all of a sudden just start saying, I was this person, I had these friends, names, places, everything else that have been verified and in their lifetimes. And so it's remarkable. And there's story upon story from all different cultures of this. And so it really changed my view on all of that. And the love thing, when I was a pastor, even I had a problem in my Christianity because I always felt that God was bigger even than what we were instructed to preach or whatever, or I just felt God was bigger. I always did. And then I went to work at hospice and I experienced some of that because it was different cultures and different things that I saw spiritual things happening in. And now full circle all the way up to where I am now. And that was, 20 some years ago. Now, this occurring in my life with my son and everything, and me learning about near-death experiences and this opening and enlightenment. It's a progression that I see. And but the love thing is what I was trying to get to with the God being bigger, because love is a huge word. It's been very minimalized in our culture, and it is a huge thing, and you experience it more and more in such a depth when you really start seeking out what you're talking about and getting in touch with who we are in the cosmos and what we are.
Beautiful.
And yeah.
That's beautiful. And there is one near-death experience actually also in the book. A person named Denise, she was electrocuted and had a near-death experience. And so that is detailed in the book, her telling the story of what it was like to die, and the quality of love just comes through so immensely, which is a common theme in a story of a near-death experience. And also one of the things she says, because this was part of her near-death experience, is that the universe loves questions.
That is great. I like that. Yeah, and that's what gets me too. There's so many stories of these types now, and so as from the skeptical standpoint, I sometimes sit there and I say, well, okay, I know people doubt this, and they would say, oh, they're just trying to make profits or whatever the case is, but they come down to this same thing, and that is the love factor is part of it all, always, and it's a deepening of that, and it's an expanding of that in their humanness that exists from that time on. Beautiful. And that cannot be disputed. And so a change in a personality and a change in a person that way for no other reason than what they experienced is the verification of that.
Right. It's stunning and hopeful, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know where you're at with death, but I love being alive, and yet seems that we're part of this eternity, and it's full of love. So,
yeah, I don't fear it. I don't fear it anymore. I did, and I've said this before on the podcast, that I feared it even when I was a pastor. And who knows? Maybe people would say, "Oh, well, your faith wasn't deep enough," or whatever. I don't care, but I just know I feared it. But since my son's passing, and what I've experienced since, and what I'm learning, and what I believe I'm being enlightened to, I don't fear it. And I commonly say too that I don't fear life because of that. And so that's very freeing, because, and I know say I got a cancer diagnosis. Is my humanness going to have a struggle with that? Of course it is. It's not that you're going to lose fear or all those things. But on the whole sense, I can take it to another step and another level to, it's almost like when all these things happen around us now, with the media and everything going on in our world, whatever it may be, and you can get all stressed out about that if you're sitting there looking at it. A lot of times I just come back within and I just say, no, there's so much more bigger than this that I'm part of, that makes no difference whatsoever in that. And so I try to get just back down to that, because our ego, our brain, this human element that we have is going to fight that and then give us the emotions and all those things that we experience here that are stumbling blocks with that freedom, I guess.
Yeah, so, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I do think it's important to work with all of that and to not bypass that and to process one's fear and grief around all of this. And also, I do have to say that as part of the processing, I really have come to, oh, wow, I'm in a relationship with infinity. So if something bad happens or, someone cuts you off in traffic or whatever, it's like, well, I'm hanging out in infinity. Why is that going to bother me?
I go one way or the other. I've now reached a point to where I'm very, reactive sometimes. And I found that to be true, where I'm just like, I don't give a crap. So it's different in different areas, I guess, but amazing. Kristina, amazing conversation. With everything that you're doing now and part of what we just discussed as far as helping humanity in general and all of this, what do you want to bring out about that for people?
Well, a lot of things, and thanks for the question, but one of the things is trusting your pain and going towards your pain and working with your pain. And there's great freedom in that and great growth, and that enlightenment is a real thing. And also this intersection between trauma and spirituality. I studied with James Finley for a while. He's in the lineage of the Christian mystics and Thomas Merton. And he talks about the intersection between trauma and spirituality. And Carl Jung, he talks all about this in his book, the Red Book, that we need to go into the darkness and to work with it. And yes, like the death of your son, the death of my brother, these are tragic things. And even now, people are crying when they're reading the book, that there's no timeline on pain and processing, that anytime this stuff comes up is a great opportunity to work with it and to find deeper healing, deeper understanding. So that's a little taste of it in addition to everything we've talked about. Anything else you want to hear or talk about?
No, it's whatever you want to say. But really, I think those things, though, too, when you are getting in touch with that grief, trauma, whatever it may be, and within somebody else, it's going to help to implement that love factor to a great degree. I heard one of the greatest things, people say the wrong things, all this time when grief happens and when loss happens, all the wrong things that people say when they're trying to be good. And so I've come down now to just say to people, truly love them. And perhaps it wouldn't be said the same way or something like that. Like, oh, they're in a better place, or whatever. Yeah. A better place. What do you mean? They should be here with me. That's not right. So if you can really embrace love and compassion for somebody, then I believe that the right words are just going to formulate and come out. And so I think that's the hardest thing, that people get too consumed with their own misgivings on all of this, and they start stumbling over all of that, and they make those errors on things. But loving them, just love them. And sometimes that's just listening. That's just being there and being with them, hugging them, whatever the case is, but love them, truly look into them and see what their need is and love them in that. And that's the best grief help you can give.
Yeah, that's beautiful, right? Just like holding someone's hand and looking to their eyes and being like, I'm here with you and I feel your pain. Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's all right not to have the great words and everything. You don't have to be an orator.
No, often silence is some of the best holding ever.
I love that you talked about how that's bringing that out in people as they read the book. That's great. That's a very living thing. It's a very organic thing, and that's or I guess if that's the right word, I don't know, but it seems alive.
On that note, you're making me realize this thing. It's when we talk about love, right? And this intersection between pain and, I just called it trauma and spirituality, but this intersection between pain and love, because people are healing, people are reaching out to me, people are saying, wow, to your book, because there's love, right? There's, and the love never went away. For the people who knew my brother, the love never went away. And so they're holding that in their bodies all this time, decades later. And that is the nature of love, right? It never goes away. And so to really be able to feel that fresh again versus having it covered up with pain, like that's partly what the grief process, the gifts of the grief process is, to be able to rest in the love for the person instead of the suffering that comes along with how much we love them now and that they died.
Yeah. That just, I don't know why it just spurred it up in my mind. Well, I know why, but, in my relationship with Judy, I've been with her for 15 years, and she was not Jeff's mom, but Jeff lived with us for 2.5 years. They were very close. And so a different dynamic with her and Jeff's loss. But sometimes I know what I've experienced and what I'm trying to be better at is not to be complacent, like in a close relationship like this. Maybe this is something for everybody out there, that, you can become very, complacent's the word, I guess, just to say that, you take for granted things, or you may not approach it the exact same way. And I've been guilty of this, where, I may be showing compassion on a deeper level for someone out there and not someone right here. And then, so that's a caution that I would throw out to people that I've made a mistake with. And I don't know why that happens. I'm trying to fight that so that doesn't happen, because I love her more than anybody else, so it's hard to, to fathom why that's happening, and it confuses you. But, I guess it's just something that rose up that I want to get out to everybody. That's something that you can be aware of.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Somehow we focus on, our nervous system focuses on loss instead of what's right in front of us.
I'm probably going to be making contact with you. It seems to me that say like someone like me with my background and my searching, in all of this with, the Christian background and some other elements that I have, investigated and looked upon, that the organization you're with, what is the name of it again? The
Center for World Philosophy and Religion.
So say someone like me comes and sends you an email and says, Kristina, this is where I'm at and what my thinking is on these things and where I draw my experience from. Do you then have resources to give me to say, here is how you take this, further or with you?
Absolutely. So the Great Library and all the books about that, the weekly live broadcast, the in-person events, those would be the foundational things. And then it's about the relationships. It's about building relationships in the context of these teachings, which really is a huge growth platform, basically playground. becoming more and being given permission to have these conversations on a regular basis and to talk about everything from the continuity of consciousness to the risks of AI to all the ways in which what does it mean to be a human being? Who am I? Where am I? What am I here to do? And also things like that the cosmos wants us to be great, wants us to awaken. So it goes on and on, the resources that are available.
And it's an exploration. It's not a, like a cult or, where we're going to tell you this is what you need to do. It's more like, no, here, open up, right? And here's your, some resources to explore that, right?
Correct. Absolutely.
That's very freeing. I would encourage anybody out there with your background, whatever it might be, then do that and look into it, because everyone needs to explore it for themselves. We can't, wherever we are individually, it doesn't matter. It's all for you and where you are and how to bring that out in yourself. So I'd encourage you to do that. So
beautiful.
Well, yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Kristina, very much. A very enlightening conversation. And I'm very excited to explore more of the resources and to hopefully enhance my journey with that too.
Fantastic. I look forward to more discussions with you down the road. And just another little shout out for the book, What My Brother Knew. You can get it at your local bookstore. You can order it from your library, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and also I need reviews. So anyone who reads it, put up a review.
Well, I'm going to put that right in the show notes too. After the link, I'll put them.
Excellent. Thank
Share
you.
your review.
I appreciate that.
Absolutely. All here to help. This is, like I said, this is always a commercial for the people I have on, and that's what it's all about. So
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm
looking forward to reading the book too. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Kristina, thanks. Have a great day, and we'll be in contact. Thank you for listening to the Heroes in Grief podcast. If you'd like access to any of the links that we discussed in today's show, you can find them in the show notes. There's also a link there to support the podcast if you care to. And there is an email link for me there. I'd love to hear from you and your ideas about the show or what you thought about the show. You really can help out this podcast to get to more people if you subscribe, rate, or review it in whichever way your platform provides. Each week, Heroes in Grief is released on Sunday, so look for new episodes there. Thank you again for listening to Heroes in Grief.